Well, thanks, Randy, and good morning, everyone. Just a quick check. Does the screen look okay?
It does. It looks great.
Okay, perfect. This is an update that's similar to what I gave last year. In terms of what's new, it's mainly moving down the path towards operationalizing some of what I showed last year. But at least it's a chance for me to provide an update. And at least with some of the tools that are available, we find that there's still not quite complete awareness of what's on the WOC page, the internal SPC page. So I'll talk about that and efforts to make that available for remote or home use. This is the SPC internal page. It's the WOC page. And it was really something we created a few years ago to put tools and information on it for your use, but not to make it public. So you have to be on a NOAA.gov computer to use it. We are working really hard to make this available for home use. It would be using your email login credentials. I was told this morning that the web link that you see there will change when that takes place, hopefully in the next week to 10 days. And I'll provide that to all the regions to share with offices. But in this page are three tools that I think are quite helpful for real-time forecasting and IDSS use. The first is the watch status graphic. The second is the outlook preview graphic. And the third is the severe storm timing guidance, and also with our event-driven day one outlook update. So let me go through each of those real quickly individually. The watch status graphic, when I first saw this, I was really excited about it. It was developed by one of our techniques development meteorologist, Matt Elliott, came to us from the Sterling WFO. And really it was his attempt to take a pretty useless product, and that was the watch status message, and make it into something graphic, something visual that you can quickly look at and determine, are my counties recommended to stay in, stay out, or have they previously been recommended for clearing? And you can see at any time that you want to look at it. The directives say that canceling counties should be done with coordination through SPC. We get a lot of calls and chats each year on that. But if you see it on this watch status graphic that we have recommended it for clearing, then feel free to do that with no need to reach out unless you have questions or concerns. And I have been asked in the past, why didn't we just put this for public availability? And the reason is simply that this is just a recommendation. You own the watch once it's issued. It's really your call. And so we didn't want anything that is in this content to be confused with official decisions on the status of counties that are either in or out of a watch. So hopefully this is helpful for you, makes your job easier. Feel free to reach out anytime you have questions, of course, but in a pinch, you can look at this and proceed accordingly if you agree. The outlook preview graphic has been around for a few years now, and it's, I think, steadily grown in visibility. People are using it. It was as a result of field requests to let you see the outlook before the rest of the world does. And so our internal process is such that we share it anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes before the outlook goes out. There have been a few cases, I will say, where because of last minute changes or just the forecaster forgot to share it, it didn't happen. But I hope routinely you find that it is available. And we do it for the day 3, the day 2, and day 1 outlooks through 1630Z. Beyond that, it's typically driven by recent developments, and so it's much harder to share a preview version. And typically by then we're usually either in warning ops or it's imminent. So we try to do it for all the outlooks that have real sensitivity to IDSS messaging and before the event begins. The feedback we've gotten has been great. I will just stress that there is, I think, on some people's thoughts, a belief that this is a trigger for collaboration, and this is the near final product. Using the previous outlook, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But this version, 10 to 15 minutes before the outlook is issued, we're essentially in a final review of the text, making sure that everything is correct, the graphics are proper, and will be decoded properly for people who use the graphics for downstream analysis and development. So this is just your chance to see what we're about to issue before everybody else does. Third thing that's on the WOC page is the timing guidance. This has been, I think, 3 years now it's been available. I'm pretty excited about this. I will say that when we talk with WFOs who will reach out to us about timing issues. We'll ask them if they've looked at this, and it ranges from either, no, I forgot, to what are you talking about? So I just want to continue to stress this because I think it is a useful tool. Like I said, we're working on the remote access, which I know is critical when we're in the pandemic operating environment. The benefit that I see here is that it provides nationally consistent timing information for each hazard, for tornado, wind, and hail. And by clicking on the grid point or time series button there, you can actually click on any grid point on the map and see this time series of the probabilistic and categorical risk at that point. So it could be useful for IDSS, for forecast decision making. On the page, it actually says, be careful or don't use it for public purposes. I would say at this point, if you feel comfortable with it, if you think it conveys your reasoning and you think it would help in your communicating of risk, feel free to do it. I know that some offices have done it in other parts of the country, and we've gotten good feedback. So I would say it's up to your call how you want to use it, and don't hesitate to use it publicly if you think it would help. There are shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts that will provide a lot of additional information, such as earliest time of arrival for slight risk or higher probabilities. So feel free to explore that. And what I'd really like to say here is that we'd welcome your feedback. We've already gotten comments, and very good ones, that are on our list to change the time down here from Z time to something that would automatically recognize the time zone you're in and show it in local time. So that was a great suggestion, and one that is, like I said, on our list to implement, hopefully here in the not too distant future. The timing guidance uses the HREF, the convection allowing aspects, uses the SREF for the environmental variables. And what we find is that for events, of course, that the HREF handles well, it provides really good timing guidance. And there's going to be a new version that will start the 30-day stability test, the HREF version 3, here in just a couple of weeks. Implementation, assuming the stability test goes well, would be in early May. And this will be the last upgrade to the HREF before it's replaced in roughly 3 years if the current timetable holds with the RRFS. So this will be the last big change. And I think our internal assessment is it does improve on an already very useful product, the HREF, and we'd appreciate your thoughts as you begin to use it in operations, or if you are using it, don't hesitate to let myself or Patrick Marsh or Sue Israel Iraq know your thoughts, and especially any ideas to help make it even better. Sort of simultaneous with the availability of the timing guidance is something that we've been talking about doing here for a few years and actually implemented last year, and that is doing more frequent event-driven day one Outlook updates. We do it on the walk page. Again, we're not quite ready to make it operational. We've been gathering data on the few times we've done it. A challenge internally is we don't have someone working the desk that would do that 24/7. So right now it's just something that we do on the order of 8 hours a day. Again, internally, we have that one shift that focuses on this, generally timed with the ramp up in the convective threat on a typical day. It's a noon to 8 shift here in the warm season. And what we do is we use intermediate probabilities. So for wind and hail, it's the ones that are underlined and bolded here in this middle section of text. And it's our effort really to try to pin down corridors of higher risk, something that we knew has been an existing service gap and something that we feel like we can add value to with these intermediate probabilities. And we chose intermediate primarily to make sure that we don't inadvertently cause upgrades and risk. And if you think about how do you convey risk, there's sort of an outlook scale. And then as you get to progressively smaller scales, the probabilities would go up, but that doesn't necessarily map to categorical risk increases. If you could draw a storm scale risk probability, every event would be a high risk because it would be a high likelihood of that storm affecting a local area, but that's not the same as a high risk over a large area, in a day or two in advance of an event. So the intermediate probabilities allow us to identify the corridors where the risk may be greater without having unanticipated impacts on the risk category itself. So our goal here is basically to merge the CAM information into our existing Outlook structure through these updates. And again, as you use them, if you find them helpful, let us know. If not, that's also very helpful information. It will help guide how this process might evolve here at SPC. Any presentation from SPC wouldn't be complete without a brief discussion on outlet collaboration. So I thought I would just cover a few things here from our perspective and would welcome discussion here when I'm done. First thing I would say is that collaboration requests continue to increase here at SPC. And I understand why. Certainly, it's IDSS, it's consistency, it's a desire to provide the best possible service, ranging from our outlooks here down to the very short-term and most detailed products that are issued at other offices. And so we want to accommodate that, but at the same time, still be able to do our job within the time constraints that we have. And so, as I mentioned earlier, based on the previous outlook, which is the easiest way to reach out to us, a call or a chat, probably a slight preference towards a chat, because more people here can see it. And even if, say, the lead forecaster mentions their response, somebody else could type it if the lead is busy. So we can get back to you pretty quickly. Our focus here, and I tell our forecasters that when we reach out to you, to just be concise. The challenge for some of our outlooks, we have 60 to 90 minutes from start to finish, which for a nationally consistent outlook is really pushing it. And so if we can just get to the issues that are on your mind or our mind, that helps everyone. And again, the focus is on the meteorology with the outlook, unlike the watch, which we can consider non-meteorological factors like approaching holidays or metropolitan areas, things like that. For the outlook, it's really just a subjectively calibrated probabilistic risk assessment. And so we're going to focus on the meteorology that might guide that. It is helpful if you can talk with your surrounding offices. I would just ask that when you call us, just mention that you've coordinated with surrounding offices and here's sort of the thought that you've reached consensus on. That's helpful. We do still get calls from offices that say we've talked with our neighbors and we want you to move this line here and another line there. And it's better for us if you just tell us what's on your mind and we can get to a discussion about how those lines might change. Because in the end, our forecaster's name is on it and they have to be comfortable with it as well. And I do believe, and there's evidence that shows that if we can do this effectively, we can improve the final product. There are definitely outlooks that I can think of in my 9 years here that were improved by collaboration with WFOs in the affected area. So we want to do that. But from my perspective as the chief of ops here, I just have to make sure that our forecasters can do their job with the time that they have. Here's the outlook collaboration window. This has been shared, I think, for a few to several years now, but I just wanted to reiterate it again. For most outlooks, and the issuance time would be on the far left column here, the best time to reach out to us is in the 1 to 2 hour prior, in that 1 hour time frame. Gets a little challenging for some of the extended outlooks where you only have 90 minutes to begin with, but we'll do our best. We're going to do our best to listen to your concerns, factor them into the outlook decision process, and then go from there. Wanted to mention MDs real quick towards the end. We've gotten really good feedback on the watch probability MDs, not just from within the National Weather Service, but broadcast community. Even emergency managers have told me that they've started to key on the watch probability MD rather than the watch itself when it comes to activating local severe weather plans. So it's good to hear that the MD is having its intended purpose. We did an analysis a couple of years ago on our internal skill at predicting our watch issuance and made just some minor adjustments to better reflect that. So hopefully what you see regarding the severe potential, whether it's watch unlikely, possible, or likely, it'll be a decision that's shared and more often than not exactly predicts what's going to unfold. I did have a question not too long ago about why we say watch probability 80 or 95 and not just 100. And the reason is it's a shared decision in the end. I know we have the 51% when it's needed. In my 9 years here, I really can only think of 1 or 2 times where that was needed. We can almost always come to agreement, but in the end, it's a shared decision the vast majority of the time. So that's why it doesn't say 100. I would say that if you get an MD and you're either on the fringe or you're in it, but you disagree with our assessment, reach out to us then. It's actually easier because if we agree with you, then we can leave you off the watch coordination call. Makes your job easier and ours as well. If you agree, you feel free to send us a note and just say, saw your MD, agree, look forward to chatting shortly. Then that lets us know as well that you're in line with our thinking. Either way, it's helpful. In recent years, we've done it in the past, but I'd say in recent years, certainly the last 2 or 3, there's been an increase here in what we refer to as meso-beta scale. It's the sub-watch scale. And you've got the large area with either convective trends or watch probability. And then once a watch is issued, rather than just writing roughly 2-hour updated MDs on the entire watch area, there are times where we can be more specific in terms of areas within the watch that appear to have a greater evolving risk. And so there's been an increased emphasis here at SPC to put that information out, hopefully in a timely fashion. Here's an example of one of the, I'd say the earlier efforts, not the first, but one of the earlier efforts a couple of years ago, preceding the Lee County, Alabama tornado that unfortunately resulted in a really large loss of life, 23 fatalities. We try to do this for all hazards. Most of them have been for tornadoes because of the impacts of tornadoes, and also because it's often easier to see, at least somewhat easier to see where the threat may be ramping up. A little tougher with wind, which can occur under a variety of conditions, but we have tried to do some of those as well. But again, it's our desire to contribute in the 2 to 4 hour time frame prior to impact where we think those higher risk corridors are likely setting up. Here's an example of a couple of sub-watch scale MDs. These are, again, the meso-beta, focusing on a few counties, maybe in some cases 10 to 20, and roughly 2 to 4 hours. The one on the left there is 1 to 2 hours just because of predictability limits. But again, it's our goal to try to tell the outside world, both within the NWS and beyond NOAA and National Weather Service interest, what we think is likely to happen. We try to be very sensitive and largely stay out of the warning time frame. The directive says that we're supposed to provide updates on the mesoscale and storm scale, but our focus is on the mesoscale. And the few storm scale MDs that we've done prior to, I'd say, the middle part of last spring that had explicit wind speeds were designed to focus attention on some new research that I personally believe has great utility in a WFO warning environment. Since those first few MDs have gone out with wind speeds, we've removed the wind speeds and just made generic sort of adjective references to possible tornado intensity. And we only do that for high end. It actually requires a strongly worded warning with a considerable or catastrophic tag. It requires a TDS. It requires a downstream environment, and this is crucial, that suggests the threat will continue beyond the warning time frame. If it doesn't, we don't put one out. And so our goal is not to do any more of those. It's just to do them in extreme situations when the threat may persist beyond the current warning. Over the last couple of years, we've averaged about 10 a year out of 2,500 MDs. So it's a really small percentage. But again, I really think that the underpinning work of that, which was decades worth of work by Rich Thompson and Brian Smith, which started out to try to better anticipate storm mode here at SPC, it does have some operational value for real-time tornado intensity estimation, and we're sharing that with regions now, and hopefully that will find its way into warning operations for routine use. I really think it has value there. I wanted to end with just a brief update, and this is tentative. This is not necessarily etched in stone yet, but it's what we're thinking for likely topics for the 2021 virtual HWT, the Spring Forecast Experiment. It'll run from May 3rd to June 4th. Again, some of the early plans include evaluation of the 3D RTMA, which is going to be the replacement for the SPC meso analysis. We've done some work in recent years on looking at finer resolution to the SPC meso analysis, and found that for the computational resource increase and the increase in time to upload the data, you really didn't get that much better output. And so the combination of that, plus realizing that the 3D RTMA is on its way, for the last 3 or so years, it's been our focus to work within the testbed environment and to make sure that the 3D RTMA is a good replacement to the meso analysis. We also have a number of collaborative projects with INCAR and JTTI, the Joint Technology Transfer Initiative, on evaluation of machine learning and artificial intelligence. We have some SIMS research associates here also working on that. We're also looking at exploring CAM ensemble design through the community leveraged unified ensemble. That would include many different CAM ensembles. Also looking at the GEF's ability to replace the HREF in forecasting severe storm environments. And then lastly, looking at day 1 and day 2 convective outlooks, again, in an experimental sense, looking at coverage and conditional intensity. And this would, in theory, help drive some impact models that we could employ down the road to really convert the outlook, which has skill in forecasting intensity, into some useful information for decision makers, FEMA, state emergency managers, even perhaps at the local level. So just to my final slide here, with our where we're planning and thinking of going here with Service Evolution, exploring the use of double hatched areas in our outlooks to convey the potential for particularly high-end tornado, severe wind and hail events. We haven't set the thresholds yet, but obviously it would be higher than what we have now for the SIG severe. And we'd also look at having like a lower probability of 5% risk. This would help with cases along dry lines and other places where the threat is not great that a storm forms, but if one forms, the conditional risk for severe could be potentially on the high end. The last thing I'll say, these two bullets are tied together, is that a milestone we have for this year is gathering best practices from several recent and ongoing research efforts into SPC risk communication. And so I made an attempt to list just some of the folks that we're working with: Castle Williams, Sean Ernst, Joe Rittberger, Julie DeMuth, Jen Henderson, Jen Spinney, among several others. And our goal is that we would take this information and it would help guide future changes to how we communicate risk through the convective and fire weather outlooks. Mostly to this point, it's been focused on the convective outlook. So, you know, we know the words aren't perfect. There aren't 5 words in the English language that probably convey risk uniformly to everyone from low to high risk, but some combination of a change in the words, the use of colors, numbers, and eventually icons could help all of us to convey risk more consistently. And this isn't something that we'll do in a vacuum. This will involve perspectives throughout the weather enterprise. So I wanted to make everyone aware of that. I don't have any more details at this point. The work that's been published probably speaks for itself, but we're going to try to pull the best from all of that to guide future changes. And that is my last slide. I'd be glad to answer any questions.